It was a typical afternoon, the kind where the sun feels like it's hanging on the edge of the horizon, casting a golden glow over everything. I remember the quietness too, how the house felt unusually still. It wasn't like I was expecting company, but there was a certain emptiness in the air, almost like the walls themselves were holding their breath. I had just gotten home from work, dropping my briefcase by the door and kicking off my shoes. The place was exactly how I left it, empty. I always liked being alone after a long day, the quiet comfort of being in my own space without anyone else around. It felt like a luxury, honestly. The hum of the refrigerator in the kitchen was the only sound breaking the silence. The floorboards creaked under my weight as I wandered further into the house, the soft shadows from the setting sun stretching out before me. The living room was just as I remembered. Nothing had moved. The couch was in its usual place, the coffee table cluttered with old magazines, and the curtains slightly drawn, letting in just enough light to make everything seem normal. The normalcy felt reassuring. But that's when I heard it. At first, I thought it was just my imagination, or maybe the house settling. You know how old houses have their quirks, right? A random door creaks, a floorboard shifts, and it's nothing to worry about. But then it happened again, this faint, distinct sound of footsteps, soft at first, like someone was walking through the hallway outside the living room. My heart skipped. I stood still, holding my breath, straining my ears to hear it again. Nothing. I told myself it was probably the house. The wind outside, maybe. It was a bit gusty today. I made my way to the kitchen, opening the fridge to grab a bottle of water, all the while telling myself I was being paranoid. But as I twisted the cap off the bottle, I heard it again. A step. Another. Slow, measured. I froze. My eyes darted toward the hallway, but all I saw was the same stretch of dimly lit space. Empty, silent. I'm not the kind of guy to jump at shadows, but something about the footsteps didn't sit right with me. They weren't loud enough to be from someone downstairs or outside. No, these were right here. Inside. I put the bottle down, my throat suddenly dry. Slowly, I turned toward the hallway, hoping I was just hearing things. I didn't want to believe it, but deep down I knew someone else was here. Hello, I called out, my voice shaky, but trying to sound calm. Is anyone there? Of course, no answer came. I waited, breath caught in my chest. The silence that followed felt too silent, almost unnatural. Then, right when I thought I might be going crazy, I heard it again. A step. Closer this time. I didn't move. My legs felt like they were frozen to the floor. The kind of frozen you get when something primal in your brain tells you not to move, not to make a sound. I tried to convince myself it was just the wind again, but my gut told me it was something else. Something more. Another step. I couldn't take it anymore. My heart was hammering in my chest, and my head was screaming at me to run, to do something, anything. But I stayed rooted to the spot, my hand gripping the edge of the counter so tightly my knuckles ached. The footsteps were getting louder, closer, until I could hear them on the hardwood floor. The sound of them was unmistakable, slow, deliberate, like someone was taking their time, savoring the moment. I finally managed to move, just a little. I crept forward toward the hallway, every step I took feeling like it was a mile. I didn't want to look around the corner. I wasn't ready, but my feet kept moving, driven by some force I couldn't understand. The footsteps stopped. The silence returned. But I could feel it. I could feel that something had changed. Something wasn't right anymore. My pulse raced as I reached the corner of the hallway, and with a shaky breath, I peered around it. Nothing. There was no one there. No one at all. The hallway was empty, just like the living room had been. My mind started to race, replaying every little sound I thought I'd heard, questioning my own sanity. But then something caught my eye. The door to the closet was slightly ajar. I don't know why, but I felt my stomach twist. My first instinct was to pull away, to leave the hallway, to get out of the house altogether. But my feet were already moving, walking toward the door, drawn to it like a moth to a flame. I reached the door and hesitated. For a long moment, I just stood there, staring at the crack in the door. I don't know what I thought I'd find. I wasn't even sure if I wanted to open it, but something made me do it. Slowly, I pushed the door open. Empty, just coats and boxes. But there was one thing that caught my eye. The floorboards near the back of the closet were slightly disturbed, like someone had been standing there recently. My breath hitched. I could feel my pulse pounding in my ears, my chest tight with fear. I backed away slowly, my mind racing. I was alone, right? I had to be. But those footsteps, they weren't my imagination. And I was not alone. I don't know how long I stood there, staring at the closet, like it held some dark secret just out of reach. My mind couldn't quite process what I'd just seen. Coats, boxes, the unsettling disturbance in the floorboards. But there was something else, something heavier in the air now. It wasn't just the footsteps. It was the feeling of being watched. A cold, oppressive feeling that settled over me like a blanket of dread. My skin prickled, and I could feel my heartbeat in my throat. I didn't want to leave, but I didn't want to stay either. I backed out of the closet, my eyes darting around, expecting to see someone step out from the shadows. But the hallway was still empty. Too empty. Then came that voice in my head, the one I couldn't shake. Go to the kitchen. Get the knife. Just in case. It was a thought so quick, so fleeting, that it almost didn't feel like mine. But it lingered, and for the first time that day, I found myself running toward the kitchen, as if it were the only place left in the world that could offer me any kind of safety. I grabbed a sharp knife from the drawer. The cold steel in my hand felt grounding, like I could defend myself if it came to that. The footsteps, I couldn't get them out of my head. I leaned against the counter, trying to catch my breath, the knife still clutched in my hand. The seconds stretched on. The house was too quiet. I realized then that the refrigerator's hum was the only sound I could hear. Everything else was dead still. That's when I heard it again. A soft thud, like something heavy had dropped onto the floor. I felt my stomach drop as I stood frozen. It came from upstairs. I knew it. I didn't need to check. The thud echoed through the house, almost as if mocking me, daring me to investigate. My mind screamed at me to leave, to run, to get out of this house and never look back. But my legs, my stupid legs, carried me toward the stairs, one step at a time, my grip tightening on the knife. The air felt colder as I made my way up, and each step creaked under my weight, amplifying the silence around me. I reached the top of the stairs and stood there for a moment, staring at the hallway. The light from downstairs barely reached up here, leaving the upper floor in near darkness. The darkness seemed to stretch and sway, alive in its own twisted way. That's when I heard it again. The footsteps. Not from downstairs this time. No, they were coming from the room at the end of the hall. My bedroom. I don't know why, but I found myself walking toward it, slowly, cautiously. My legs felt weak beneath me, but I kept going, pulled by an invisible force. As I reached the door to my bedroom, the air felt thicker, suffocating. I raised the knife in front of me, the cool metal glinting in the faint light. My breath was shallow, my throat dry. I reached for the doorknob, half expecting it to turn in my hand and fling the door open on its own, but it didn't. I twisted it slowly. The door creaked open. The room was normal, everything in place. The bed neatly made, clothes scattered across the floor, a lamp casting a faint warm glow. But then I noticed something. The window, it was open. I couldn't remember opening it. Hell, I hadn't even thought to open it. But there it was, wide open, the curtains fluttering slightly as the wind blew in. That was when I heard the whisper. It was low, almost inaudible. A voice, just on the edge of hearing. "Get out." My blood ran cold. I couldn't breathe, couldn't move. I stood there in the doorway, the knife still clutched in my shaking hand. The room was empty. There was no one there. I was alone, wasn't I? But the voice, it was real. I backed away from the door, my feet stumbling against the floorboards, my mind screaming at me to leave. I turned, my heart racing in my chest as I ran back down the hall, faster now, adrenaline pushing me forward. The stairs came up too quickly, too close. I wasn't sure if I was hearing things, but I swear I could hear someone behind me, footsteps following mine down the stairs. I burst into the living room, panic rising in my chest, my breath coming in ragged gasps. I spun around, expecting to see someone there, but the room was empty, too empty. I felt like the walls were closing in on me, and that's when I saw it. On the wall, across from the hallway entrance, there was something I hadn't noticed before. A handprint, smudged and dark, as if someone had pressed their hand against the wall and left a mark. The thing that made my blood run cold wasn't the handprint itself. It was the way it was smeared, like someone had dragged their hand along the wall in an attempt to follow me. My pulse pounded in my ears. The room felt smaller now, the air thick with dread. The silence felt deafening. I couldn't make sense of any of this. The footsteps started again. Only this time, they were coming from behind me. I spun around, my heart in my throat. And there, standing in the doorway to the living room, was a shadow. A figure, tall and dark, blocking the only way out. I couldn't move. My legs refused to cooperate. It didn't speak. It didn't need to. The shadow was the only thing that mattered now. It was the thing that had been stalking me, inching closer every time I turned around. And in that moment, I understood one terrible truth. I was not alone. I couldn't breathe. The figure in the doorway stood motionless, blocking my only escape. Its presence swallowed the air, thick and suffocating, pressing down on me like an unseen force. My fingers trembled around the knife, but what good was a blade against something that might not even be human? The light flickered, once, twice, and then darkness. Panic shot through me like ice in my veins. The entire house was swallowed in blackness, the only sound my ragged breathing. My pulse pounded against my skull, deafening in the silence. Then came the sound, a whisper, low, guttural. "Close. You shouldn't be here." A shudder ran down my spine, and I stumbled back, my heel catching on the rug. I hit the floor hard, the knife clattering from my grip. My hand scrambled across the wood, searching for it, for anything, as I fought to push myself upright. The whisper came again. This time, right beside me. "Run!" Something ice-cold brushed my cheek. I lost it. I launched myself to my feet, my body moving before my mind could catch up. My legs burned as I bolted toward the front door, the darkness pressing in around me. My fingers fumbled at the lock. Why wouldn't it turn? The deadbolt was stuck, unmoving, as if welded shut. A breath, slow, deliberate, against the back of my neck. I spun, my back slamming into the door, my breath hitched in my throat. Nothing. No shadow, no figure, no whisper. But the house wasn't empty. The air felt charged, thick with something unseen, but undeniably there. A presence, a hunger. I could feel it watching me, circling like a predator waiting for its prey to make a mistake. Then, from above, boom, a heavy crash from the second floor, shaking the ceiling so hard that dust rained down. It sounded like someone had thrown themselves against the floor, or fallen. My body refused to move, but my mind was screaming, "Get out now." The windows. I turned and ran for the living room, my eyes locked on the nearest window. I didn't care if I had to break it, I had to get out. But just as I reached for the curtain, I stopped cold. The window was no longer open. It had been. I knew it had been. I saw it myself. But now the glass was shut tight, the locks twisted back into place, and on the other side, a reflection, but not mine. The figure stood just beyond the glass, its face obscured, featureless. My breath hitched as it raised a hand, slowly, deliberately, pressing a palm against the glass, a palm marked with the same dark smear as the handprint on my wall. My chest tightened. I stumbled back, my mind scrambling for a way out. The stairs loomed to my right, leading up to the second floor. And then the footsteps returned. Not from behind me, not from the walls, from the ceiling, directly above me. Slow, deliberate. The sound of something moving across the floorboards, step by agonizing step. It was right above me. I couldn't do this. I had to run. I turned on my heel, my body moving before my mind could stop me. The front door wouldn't open, the windows were shut, but there was one place left. The basement. I ran. The door to the basement groaned as I wrenched it open, the darkness inside stretching downward into nothingness. My feet pounded against the stairs as I descended, my breath coming in sharp, shallow gasps. The air was thick, damp, wrong. I reached the bottom, my eyes struggling to adjust to the pitch black. The only light came from the thin slaver spilling in from the open door above me. My hands fumbled along the wall, searching for the pull cord to the overhead light. I found it, yanked. Dim, flickering light sputtered to life. And I saw them. Handprints. Not just one, not just two. Dozens streaked across the walls, some high, some low, as if they had been dragged across the surface. The smears were dark, uneven, leading toward the far corner of the basement where an old wooden cabinet stood. A cabinet I had never seen before. A cabinet I knew shouldn't be there. I wanted to turn and run. I wanted to flee up those stairs and never look back. But something, some terrible force, held me in place. Then a creak. The cabinet door moved. Just an inch. Just enough. Enough to see fingers, long thin fingers, curling around the edge. I gasped. And that's when the whisper came again. "It's not your house anymore." The light went out. I screamed. I don't remember running. I don't remember bursting through the basement door or how I got to my car. All I know is that I was suddenly outside, my hands shaking as I fumbled for my keys. I drove, as fast and as far as I could. I never went back. I sold the house without stepping foot inside again. But sometimes, late at night, when I close my eyes, I still hear the footsteps. And I know, deep down, that whatever was in that house, it's still there, waiting.